recording. So I have a hello world ready to go. And then we're starting new material, lab 8. So previously we read a file and we just sort of slapped out the contents of the file. And then near the end, we did some parsing of the file and broke it up into words. Now we're going to do some other kind of reading where we don't read it all at once, but we sort of work line by line. We can read it line by line, or we can read it into sort of an array. There are all these subtle differences like array and list and array list and mutable array list. And I'm just using the word roughly as like, you know, a set of things. So I'll show you how to read sort of one line at a time. Just click a button, read one line, click the button, read the next line. And I'll show you how to read a bunch of lines and sort of make an array of lines using rough language there. And then I'm going to make some objects. So I'm going to have a class, have objects of that class, and use the data to make objects of that class. And then you're going to do, again, this is like back to lab 6, make your own. You can either make a new thing or you can keep your old thing, whichever. But instead of having the sort of parallel arrays, you're going to have a data file, and you're going to have a class and make objects of that class. So 6, most people do well on 6. They're picking a topic they're interested in, and it's pretty straightforward. And 8 is sort of the same. So this one people usually like, and it goes fairly well. Okay, so let's start. Now let me go back for a second, because I always like to ask if there are any questions on old stuff. What was due today? Oh, the one that was make your own lab, the one that I said people usually like. That is what's due today, if you're sort of keeping pace. And we're getting to be about the end of the material that is test 1 material. So soon I'll start asking you about your calendars and see if you have other major exams and so on. So I'll probably be asking you those questions next week. But there will be a test coming up. In this class, my tests are usually a 2-day affair. So I pretty much will test you on every piece of thing, almost everything that I taught you will appear somewhere on those tests. So I will, instead of trying to squeeze it all in one test and make it an impossible test, I'll split it in 2, and usually works better that way. You have time to debug. And if you have a slow computer, but you insist on using that slow computer, then you have time to sort of bring up the interface. Okay, but you ought to get here when we do have the test. Try to get here a couple minutes beforehand, if at all possible, and have a hello world ready to go. Okay. Somewhere in there, I paused to say if there were questions and got none. Okay. So I'm going to, here is this file I'm going to read. So there's my activity main. Here's the file I'm going to read, dog data, and here is my code. Okay, so we know what to, so I made a running hello world. So that means I already edited, since I'm on a lab computer, I edited the Gradle and to 30s. And now let me go to the resources. Let me start with the layout here, activity main, code, and take these 2 files and paste them in. So here's the activity main, control A, control C. I just do. Control A, control C, there we go, that's better. paste it in there. Okay, and there's not much to this. There's a button and a text. A button and a text. I'm going to click the button. I'm going to read a line of the text file. I'm going to hit the button again. I'm going to read the next line of the text file. Okay, what other, we have another resource. It is the raw resource. It's the file we're going to read. We know that we have to make the raw folder. I'm going to use the technique. There are other techniques for reading local text files, but I'm going to work with the one that is raw. It's going to be considered a raw resource in a raw folder. And it doesn't have to be a text file. You can have other possible raw resources. But there's not a raw folder here to begin with. But not all apps use any raw resources, so they don't put a directory there in the beginning, but you must make it. And you want to call it raw because there are methods that refer to the raw resources, and so it's sort of expecting the name raw. And we know that our naming convention is small letters, numbers, underscores, no capital letters, no spaces. And so it must be small case raw. It's somebody who wrote raw with a capital R, it didn't work. It didn't even see it was there. It's like, actually you go out to the file system and you can see it's there, but internally it doesn't see it because you're not obeying its naming rule. Everything's based on this idea of the namespace. And if you break the naming rules, it's going to break you back. It's just not going to work. Okay, so there's my folder, my directory, and for my raw resource, and here is my raw resource, dog data, and it's a text file. It's .txt. My computer's currently not showing you the extension, but it does have it. I'm going to right click over here and paste it in. And now you can see there's dog data.txt. But again, when we refer to it by its resource name, we will not include the .txt. I have, it is a / delimited file because I have the colors of the dog, and the colors of the dogs have commas in them. So this is one field, but that one field has some commas in it. So I couldn't use a comma separated values file because there were already some commas. So I needed to have some other delimiter. I chose slashes. Okay, so that's dog data. That goes away. I don't need the Gradle. I fixed the activity main. Now I have to do the main activity. Oops. Okay, the main activity. I'm done with that. Here's the main activity. Copy all but the package. And paste all but the package. So here is, I showed you the design. It was nothing but a button and a text view. Let me run it. Stop it, stop hello world, and now run this read line by line. And so I just have the button, and here's the text view, and it says read line, and then here's the first line of Alaskan Malamute and Australian cattle dog, and I go through all my dogs, and then at the end, it's going to say no more lines, and then this becomes can't be clicked. Okay, so that was fun. All right, so here we are, our usual connect the interface to code. We're reading a file, so we set up the input stream. Previously, we read all the file at once. We just had code and said, read that file all at once, done. We're not doing that now. We're reading it. We're going to read line by line, and therefore we need what's called the buffered reader. So these lines, there's a slight change in these lines because we're reading in a slightly different way. Establishing the raw resource, that's pretty much the same, but what we do with that stream changes slightly. Instead of reading it all, we're going to read line by line. So this 27 is different from what it was before. I don't usually have, I'm going to move to a place next where I sort of read it all at once, but make it an array of lines. And that's sort of more useful to me than this. But there are situations in which this might come up, or if you have a particularly large file, you might want to read it line by line, because there can be issues if you try to read too large of a resource all at once. So all at once is nice, it gets the job done, but it doesn't always suit your purpose. So I wanted to show you at least one other way of reading. Okay. Here's my button. I'm going to, I call this, I took my input string and applied this buffered reader to it and called that buffer. And now I'm reading a line. So I read the first line and I don't have a loop. I'm not looping through the lines. I'm not doing that. Every time they click the button, I read one line. I'm going to put it in a try catch. Hopefully I'm going to not need the try catch. I don't think this toast message came up, file reading problem, but I want to end naturally. So I said, I read a line, I call it the next line. If that line is not null, I'm going to display that line. If that line was null, I'm going to say no more lines, and I'm going to disable the button, and I'm going to close my buffer. If something went wrong, I have a toast that says something went wrong. So here it was, read the line, 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 no more lines. I don't think I saw any toasts. So I didn't end up in the catch of the try. I closed my buffer, I've disabled my button so they'll stop pressing it, and I informed the user that there were no more lines. Questions? All right. Clean that up. Okay. Nobody said any questions. We'll move to the next version. Now I'm going to read lines, but I'm going to read lines differently. I'm going to sort of, I'm interested in the lines as being sort of a unit, but I'm not, I don't want to do it one by one. So I'm going to again read lines, but so this is the compromise between the two. Our first time we read everything all at once into one big blob, into one big string. And the second time we read one line at a time. Now we're going to do the sort of mid ground. We're going to read the lines and create not one big thing. We're going to read the whole file, but we're not going to create one big thing. We're going to create a set of things, a sort of an array, a list. They have so many distinctions, it makes my mind crazy. All right. So here's read line. So this was line by line. This is all the lines at once, but treating the line structure as separate from reading the entire text. Okay. I'll download that. And oh, I have a bunch of dogs now. Dog data is the same. Main activity changed. Activity main changed because I have a picture of the dog and I have, okay. So I don't have to change the raw file, but what do I need? Activity main is new. So, because I'm going to have a picture of the dog. So this and this, I need to bring up Notepad. Control A, Control C. overwrite this. So that's the new activity main. And I'm going to do the main activity. All but the package. Main activity. All but the package. Probably. All right. So this has some red. This is the red I'm interested in. There's this start and it wants left and start and all this crazy backward compatible duplication, and I forgot about that. But here's this drawable file, and I don't have the drawables in there yet. So I'm not ready to go because I don't have my drawable resources. So dealt with activity main and main activity and dog data. I dealt with them all. I'm going to delete them, be left with just the dogs, copy all the dogs. They're drawable resource. I'm going to right click on drawable and paste them into there. So now I have my drawable resources. Okay. Over here, there's just cautions. Over there, it was red. Anyway. Okay. So there is, let me run it. That is the old one, dog day. And here's the new one. Because I'm like that. I just keep reusing these poor dogs. And I don't have the random start, so it always starts with the top dog. And so I'm showing, I have my spinner. I have the height, the average height of the dog, the colors of the dog, the characteristics of the dog. So the border collie is intelligent and shy. The boxer is alert, self-assured, and fearless, and comes in fawn and brindle, and its average height is 24 inches. Okay. All right, so how did we do that? So the file, I remind you, is this /delimited text file. The activity main is a spinner, an image view, text view, text view, text view. Now the main activity. Connect to the interface. A spinner, an image view, text view, text view, text view. Set up the input stream connecting to the raw resource. That's the same. I'm creating a buffered reader again. So I've created the buffered reader, but I'm using it differently. I'm using the buffer to read all the lines at once. So I'm not reading a line, I'm reading lines, all of them. So this reads all of the lines and makes an array of the lines. And this is telling me, I think it's a list. I want to put stuff in the spinner. I don't want to put that whole big long line in the spinner. I just want the name of the dog in the spinner. So I need to do some parsing to pull out just the name of the dog. And then from that, I'm going to make an array of just dog names. And I'm going to use the dog names array that I make to load up my spinner. You know, being really rough in my language and not distinguishing between lists and arrays and array lists and all those distinctions that they make. They're important, but I use the one that works and I move on. So other classes will tell you all the important distinctions. I'm just going to tell you the one that works in a given situation. Okay, so we set up the stream, we set up the buffer, we read all the lines. Here I am looping through the lines. Here are my lines. Item is just one line amongst the lines, or it's the element in the array. And I'm taking that item and I am splitting it. Split is break it into the pieces. You break it into pieces based on some delimiter. My delimiter was the slash. And then the first thing, the first item, the 0th token, I broke them up and I called them tokens. The 0th token, token 0, that is the name of the dog. And I made a mutable list, an array. I made an array list for the dog names, and I'm adding those dog names. So I added the dog names to this, and I'm going to use this for my spinner. All I want in my spinner are the names of the dogs. So here's my array adapter. Dog names is a code array. I just made it in code, so it's a code array. And here's my simple layout, simple spinner layout. You can change this. This would change the layout. And this sort of gives you like a blank space, sort of like an empty, not an empty space you can choose, but just sort of an empty space to sort of spread them out. So if you uncomment this out, you'll get more spaces between the dogs. But I sort of like the dogs packed together. Okay, so there's my array adapter, and then here's me using my array adapter as the adapter of the spinner. So basically populate the spinner. Then I have my spinner event. I have a toast and says which dog you chose. So you have access to, in this spinner event, you have access to the view. That's the little thing that you see. So that'll be a simple view that shows you the name of the dog. And you have int and long, and that tells you the sort of position. And so sometimes you need an int and sometimes you need a long, but usually, I think in here, I usually work with the int. And that will tell me which dog that they chose in my array. So I toasted out what was that they chose the border collie. And then I have these lines, and I'm splitting them up again. Well, I'm only taking one line. I'm taking the ith line, and I'm re-splitting it. Well, up here, when I split them, the lines were still intact. I didn't get rid of the line. I just split it up, had these tokens, used a token, used the 0 token, and that was that. But here I'm taking the ith dog. They chose a dog. That event method gives me an I. That's the position. I'm using that array of dog names is parallel to my lines array. So I'm taking the ith line, I'm splitting it on the slash again, and then I have the information I want to display. So I'm going to use the name of the dog to create my drawable resource. There are other ways to do this. This is the way I'm doing it in my dog situation. But I have my names over here, follow the scheme where I take the name of the dog, I put it into all small letters because I need that for my naming scheme. I get rid of the spaces, I need that for my naming scheme. And so I'm going to put it into lowercase, and I'm going to replace spaces with underscores. So that's what I'm doing here. The first token, when I split the line, I make a bunch of tokens. The first token, the 0th token, is the name of the dog. I put it in the lowercase, and I replace any spaces with underscores. Now I have the resource name, and from the resource name, I can get the resource ID. I'm going to get the ID, get identifier from the name. I'm looking in the drawable resources. I'm looking in the namespace of the current package. Once I have that resource name, I can set the image view's image to that ID. Okay. So that is the picture of the dog changing to whatever they chose. And now here's the other information. Tokens 1 was the dog's height. Tokens 2 was the dog color. Tokens 3 was the dog's characteristic. And so I'm displaying the text about that dog here in this. So I have a line of all the information about a dog. I pick the line of the dog that they chose, the ith dog, I'll call it, the ith, they pick in the drop-down list in the spinner, they pick something, I'll say they're picking the ith one. And then we are using that line, that ith line we're splitting, and then I'm showing you, displaying for you those tokens. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's just a stopping off point to say like, okay, here's a way we could show information, but we should do better. So the next thing we're going to do is have, see, I had all the information in an array, but it was, it needed to be reparsed every time. So they pick border collie. I've got to find the border collie data and parse it. They pick, I don't have a poodle, but they pick poodle, then I would have to take the poodle data and parse it. What I want to do is parse once and for all and create an object. That's part of what an object is for, to keep related data together. So there's all this information about border collies. So I want all that information to sort of hang together. But I also want to be able to access individual things in it. I want to be able to access the characteristics, to access the colors of the dog. And this is the sort of thing that an object gives us. That it sort of keeps data that's related together, but gives you access to the individual things. All right. And then you could have also methods that are related. And today, my class, my objects will have no methods. They're just going to be data objects. Okay. Questions on this one before I do the class version? Don't. So here we go. Back. It's taking so long to go back. All right. Modules. What are you doing, IT? There we go. Modules. Dog objects from a file. So we're going to have, well, let me talk and try to use the time until it stops spinning. We're going to have a class. I'm going to put the class in a separate file. So one thing I'm going to do, so the file, the class is going to be code. So it's going to be Kotlin. So we're going to put it up with main activity.kt in the code area. And so I'm going to have to add another file there. It is download. Downloading. Thinking about it. So we're going to, like we added raw, in the resources, we're going to have to add a KT file. Okay, finally. All right, so the dog data is the same. I don't need that. The main activity, that's changing. The activity main, that's the same. So I'm going to get rid of that. The dogs I have, so I'm not going to touch them, but here are the files I'm interested in. This is what's new. Okay. So here is my dog class, dog.kt. I'm going to come over here and that is going to go here. Here's where my code goes. Here's where my Kotlin code goes, up here under Java. It's Kotlin, but it goes under Java. And it goes in this first folder, not the test, but the first folder. And I'm going to right click there and say new, and I want it to be a Kotlin class. And then I'm going to name it. I'll call it dog. Sometimes I'll call it dog, sometimes I'll call it dog class. It's a name. Okay. When I created that file, it announced the package. If you were just going to copy my file, you have to be careful about the packages. That's the one weird thing when you're copying things back and forth, make sure you get the package right, because that defines the namespace that says where things are understood. So if you tell it to look at another namespace, it's going to be very confused. Okay. So I right clicked, I said, make me a dog class. It gave me the package, it gave me the keyword class, it said dog, it named it dog.kt. Sometimes it needs, Java for sure, I think, at least some old languages, need the name of the file and the name of the class to be the same. You can try and change them if you want. I don't know if Kotlin's requiring that or not, but it sort of set that up. I said I wanted something named dog, and it made a dog.kt and a dog class. I'm going to copy, here's my interior of the dog. And I'm going to paste that in. So here is my dog class. I made another file in the code section. Again, by right clicking, by saying new, by saying I want a Kotlin class. And then it gave me the package, it gave me the class, I filled in the middle. And as I was saying before, my class is just sort of a data-driven class. It's just about data. And what do I know about a dog in this little thing? I have the breed, the average height, the colors, and the character. And the average height was an integer, and everything else was a string. And then I'm going to have a constructor. And I'm going to say, I'm going to send it the breed, and then I'm going to send it the average height, and then I'm going to send it the colors, and then I'm going to send it the characteristics. And then I'm going to assign those properties to this and this, just to make this distinction. You don't have to make this distinction, but I called it data. So there's what comes into the constructor when you invoke the constructor. And then there's the name of the property once you've made the object. So a lot of people will name these the same thing. They'll call this breed, and that is fine. That's a convention. But what's over here on the right-hand side has to match what's in the constructor argument. And what's here on the left side has to match the properties you define your class having. And then you use the keyword this to say, as I'm making a dog, I want the dog I'm making, I want its property, I want its breed to be this first value I send. I want its height, average height, to be the second thing I send. The colors to be the third, the character to be the fourth. Okay. So a lot of times you'll see these names the same, and that's okay, but you should understand this has to match this. That's the way it works, and this has to match this. That's the way it works. If you make them all match, if you make them all the same, that's fine. You can do that. And a lot of people, that will be their convention. Sometimes I follow that convention, and sometimes I don't. So, all right, so that is the class. Now I have to update this activity. I didn't do that yet. But here is the main activity that is going to instantiate some dog objects. it's going to look, I'm going to run it, it's the same. There's dog day, that's the old one. Now here's this today, 9/23, that's today. So this is the new one, and it looks the same. It's just that behind the scenes, we're handling it in a more sophisticated way. We're using objects and classes. All right. Connect to the interface. That part didn't change. I'm going to have an array of, before I had an array of lines. And then those lines had dog information, which I parsed on the fly. Instead, now I'm going to have an array of dogs. Here is me saying that these things are going to be of the dog type. Their dog, the dog class is in the same namespace. So I don't have to import it. It belongs to the same namespace, so it will be understood. And there it is as a type. So that has to match the name of the class. So I'm making an array list of dog types. Okay, here's my input stream. Here's my buffered reader. Here I'm reading the lines. Here I'm making the dog names to use with my spinner. So I'm going to make an array of objects, and I'm going to make an array of just dog name strings. The purpose of the dog name strings is to load up the spinner. Okay. So I read the file, but since I read it as lines, I have an array of lines, and now I'm looping through the lines. I split it based on that delimiter once again, and I take the 0th delimiter, and I'm making my dog name array to use with my spinner. And now here I am instantiating a dog. I'm using the keyword, for me now, a new keyword, a keyword that I invented, or the name of my class dog, which brings in the constructor. And it was the name of the dog, the 0th token, the average height of the dog, which was the first token, but the first token is a string. When you take a string and you parse it, you get a bunch of strings. But the one with an index of 1, the second one happened to be an integer, so I'm casting it as an integer. And tokens 2 and tokens 3. So the color is the character, the name of the dog, the average height of the dog. This is me making one dog with that information that I just got from parsing a line. And then here's me adding that dog that I just made to my array of dogs. So I have an array of dogs. Okay. Here's my array adapter. I'm using that dog names array. It's a code array. I am using that to populate my spinner of dogs. That's the same as before. I have the when they choose an item from the drop-down list. Remember, we always have this other method that we're not doing anything with, but it usually wants it, so put it there, make it happy. I'm toasting out as I did before, using the text view, the name of the dog. I don't need to do that, but what I'm really mostly going to work with is the I. So I use that text to find the drawable resource. I could also use the name, the breed name of the dog, which is my first property. So they're the same. So this time I happen to be working with this text view because that's what I did before. So I just kept it. So this is all a repeat of before, but I could also work with the property of the dog, the name property of the dog, the breed property of the dog. Now finally, I'm using my array of dog breeds here. So I'm working, the user used the spinner, picked a dog. The information that's important to me is the I. So the I, then I use, the spinner tells me I, then I'm using breeds I, and I'm grabbing my properties. Average underscore height underscore inches, colors, character. Here I am using my properties. So I have an array of objects. So breeds is an array, so I need to tell it an element. And then when I have an element of the array, that's an object, and I have that object has properties defined by my class. So I made a dog object from my dog class. Next, it's your turn to pretty much do the same, just with whatever topic you're interested in. So some images, some information, choose a delimiter, choose wisely, don't have any weird symbols within your text. You can't use that same thing as the delimiter. Watch for things like who's the text file. If you have quotes or double quotes or anything in here, you may need to escape them. So if this was like self-assured for some reason in quotes, you might have to do that. Questions? Anything for the recording? No.